Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, May 22nd, 2020. And yeah, it's a 3-day weekend this upcoming weekend. Um, we officially have a Saturday and Sunday and a holiday on Monday. Monday, we will observe Memorial Day. Um, Sorry about that. Monday we will observe Memorial Day, and I do still have on the schedule that we will have our regular Monday Zoom from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So if you need anything, feel free. If you want to take the day off and relax, if you want to barbecue um, while we're zooming, you feel free to do that as well. We'll have Zoom session from 6 to 7 p.m. So yeah, hope you've got some nice, relaxing, fun things planned for this weekend. Maybe throw a frisbee out with the puppy. Maybe go for a bike ride around the neighborhood. Maybe just stay and sit at home and binge on Netflix. I started watching Outer Banks this week, so if you want, we can talk about that in those episodes. You kooks out there. Anyways, so back to our regular class. Today is Friday, May 22nd, 2020. Inspirational quote for today. It feels good to be lost in the right direction. Think about that. Hope you make it a great day today. And I know it's not today's holiday, but wanted to wish everyone a happy National Taffy Day tomorrow. Tomorrow, Saturday the 23rd, is National Taffy Day. So if you have some taffy around the house, salt water is one of my favorite. I like the saltwater taffy over at Disneyland. I actually haven't been to Disneyland in years, as Nana would say. I haven't been there in years. But every time others go, I always have a little request. If you can bring me back some saltwater taffy, I'll gladly reimburse you for your time and for the purchase. So saltwater taffy from Disneyland. If you get a chance, go ahead and grab you a couple of pieces tomorrow, and go ahead and enjoy that. I'm just not a huge fan of the banana Laffy Taffy. I do like a good sour or tart taffy. Um, I like the fruit flavored taffy, but I'm just not a fan of the banana flavored taffy. Anyways, if that's you out there, hey, no judgment against you. In all my classes, the only people who I have judgments on are people who put pineapple on pizza. Pineapples don't belong on pizza. No pineapples on pizza. Anyways, enough with the food topic, but just wanted to wish everyone a happy and positive and prosperous Friday today. Um, we will go back to our schedule next week. No huge um, um, anything to miss if you aren't able to join us on Monday, but we will go next week, Monday, 6 to 7 p.m. And then back at our regular Wednesday, Friday schedule, Wednesday and Friday next week, 9:30 a.m. until 11 a.m. Since Monday next week's a holiday, we will not be passing out food. So all Ventura Unified School District food distribution centers, like Data School is one of them. I know because I pass out at Data School or help with whatever is needed at Data School. We will not be passing out food on Monday. That's the 25th of May. But we will be passing at regular times on Tuesday, the 26th. So I will be there on Tuesday, May 26th. Hey, huge shout out to all the FTHS students who have been helping out. If you've been helping out at your local food distribution center, we appreciate that. The community appreciates that. wanted to give a special shout out to a few individuals who've been helping out at Data School with me. So you know who you are, but Batowski, Meacham, and Dominic Castillo, I believe. I think that's your last name. Castillo are the ones who've been helping out the last 2 weeks over at Data School. So we appreciate you, as well as all of our families. So if you wanted to stop by and say hi or pick up meals for the week, stop by next week on Tuesday at Data. We'll be there, and we'll be there. I think we distribute from 11:30 to 1 p.m., 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. So about an hour and a half. And I did speak to the cafeteria manager this last week at Data, and it was confirmed that we are going to be passing out lunches once a week, throughout the summer. So for any of you Foothill Tech students who need community service hours, you are, I'm sure, just need to make sure you get that cleared with your parental units at home, and check in with. You can either check in with me, and I can talk to the cafeteria manager over at Data for you, or you can get a hold of nutrition services at the district office. Whichever you prefer, I'm more than willing to be that bridge to help get you over to get some community service hours done, and maybe get you out of the house a little bit, helping out the community. We appreciate that. Let's see what else is going on. We're quickly approaching the end of the school year. So let's see, I think next week is the last week of May. And then the following week will be the first week of June. And that's actually the last week that I'm accepting assignments. So your PE workout log will be due in 2 weeks. So 2 Fridays from now. There's next week Friday and the Friday after that. And I will make sure to continue to remind you about that. Let's see. So make sure you're up to date with Edgenuity or Canvas, Google Classroom, whatever your requirements are for those classes. If you have questions about anything throughout the session today, make sure you type those questions or comments or concerns in the chat box. Just make sure I get that typed in there. So just make sure to type your questions or comments in the chat box, and I will address them accordingly. If it's, for you individually, I'll get back to you individually, either via email or direct message. And maybe it's an individual, but I can generalize it for the entire group so that everyone can get the information. I believe that June 5th deadline is the same for all the other classes. The following week, I believe, would have been normally exam week. So it would have been our semester exam, our semester finals. So I think we're trying to get everything, squared away at that point. That first week of June as well, so not next week, but the week after, I'll be on campus throughout the week. So if you have anything in your lockers, in your PE lockers, there'll be an email sent out from our school administration about scheduled days based on your grade level, and then scheduled times based on your last name, alphabetical, on days and times for coming to school, dropping off whatever textbooks you still have, or novels from English class, or if you need to pay any obligations, or picking up yearbooks, things like that will happen during that same time. I'll be over in the black box during that time, possibly with Mrs. Stevens, but for sure I'll be there all those days collecting locks. So you and your locker partner, whoever by schedule is set to come to school first, or I can, if you want to come at the same time, I can make sure that that you're in the same time slot. Just give me a heads up, and I can try and schedule that. I will be letting people in one at a time into the locker rooms to to open up your locker, take out your belongings, and then turn in your lock. Remember, locks need to be turned in. So you didn't have to pay for your lock in the beginning of the school year. You checked one out, either for myself or Mrs. Stevens or one of the TAs, and 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 you had to use it. You had that for use throughout the school year. So now it's time to just turn it back in. If you do not have it to turn in, then there is a $5 cost to replace the lost lock, whether it was lost or stolen or whatever the case is. You don't have it to turn in. So that's where the obligation would take place, and it's $5. So you can either split that with your locker partner, $2.50 each, or just the $5 fee paid by one person. All right, more information on that will come out I'm sure next week, because we're gonna have it scheduled for the week following. So be on the lookout for that. All right, let's see. Don't see any questions yet in the chat box, but if there are, feel free to put that, throughout or whenever you'd like. Welcome again, everyone who's joining us for the first time. If you're here with us live, I appreciate you spending your morning with me and the rest of us. Some of you I know have been logging in and clicking the links after hours, excuse me, after the 11 a.m. Finish time. And so, yeah, appreciate you taking the time to listen. If there's no questions, then we will go ahead and continue reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. We are on the start of chapter 7. We went a little over last class on Wednesday, and so I think it was like 2 or 3 minutes. So I appreciate everyone for staying on until the end of that. Sorry, taking a little sip of coffee there. Yeah, so no questions. We will go ahead and continue our reading. Let me just adjust my chair a little bit here. All right, let's see. Here we go. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 7, Mudbloods and Murmurs. Harry spent a lot of time over the next few days dodging out of sight whenever he saw Gilderoy Lockhart coming down a corridor. Hard to avoid was Colin Creevey, who seemed to have memorized Harry's schedule. Nothing seemed to give Colin a bigger thrill than to say, "All right, Harry," 6 or 7 times a day, and hear, "Hello, Colin," back, however exasperated Harry sounded when he said it. Hedwig was still angry with Harry about the disastrous car journey, and Ron's wand was still malfunctioning, surpassing itself on Friday morning by shooting out of Ron's hand in charms and hitting tiny old Professor Flitwick squarely between the eyes, creating a large, throbbing green boil where it had struck. So, with one thing and another, Harry was quite glad to reach the weekend. He, Ron, and Hermione were planning to visit Hagrid on Saturday morning. Harry, however, was shaken awake several hours earlier than he would have liked by Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. "What's the matter?" said Harry groggily. "Quidditch practice," said Wood. "Come on." Harry squinted at the window. There was a thin mist hanging across the pink and gold sky. Now that he was awake, he couldn't understand how he could have slept through the racket the birds were making. "Oliver," Harry croaked, "it's the crack of dawn." "Exactly," said Wood. He was a tall and burly 6th-year, and at the moment his eyes were gleaming with a crazed enthusiasm. "It's part of our new training program. Come on, grab your broom, and let's go," said Wood heartedly. "None of the other teams have started training yet. We're going to be first off the mark this year." Yawning and shivering slightly, Harry climbed out of bed and tried to find his Quidditch robes. "Good man," said Wood. "Meet you on the field in 15 minutes. When he'd found his Scarlet Team robes and pulled on his cloak for warmth, Harry scribbled a note to Ron explaining where he'd gone and went down the spiral staircase to the common room, his Nimbus 2000 on his shoulder. He had just reached the portrait hole when there was a clatter behind him, and Colin Creevy came dashing down the spiral staircase, his camera swinging madly around his neck and something clutched in his hand. I heard someone saying your name on the stairs, Harry. Look, look what I've got here. I've had it deployed. I wanted to show you. Harry looked bemusedly at the photograph Colin was brandishing under his nose. A moving, black and white Lockhart was tugging hard on an arm Harry recognized as his own. He was pleased to see that his photographic self was putting up a good fight and refusing to be dragged into view. As Harry watched, Lockhart gave up and slumped, panting, against the white edge of the picture. Will you sign it? Said Colin eagerly. No, said Harry flatly, glancing around to check the room that the room was deserted. Sorry, Colin. I'm in a hurry. Quidditch practice. He climbed through the portrait hole. Oh, wow. Wait for me. I'd never seen a Quidditch game before. Colin scrambled through the hole after him. It'll be really boring, Harry said quickly, but Colin ignored him, his face shining with excitement. You were the youngest house player in 100 years, weren't you, Harry? Weren't you? Said Colin, trotting alongside him. You must be brilliant. I've never flown. Is it easy? Is that your broom? Is that the best one out there? Harry didn't know how to get rid of him. It was like having an extremely talkative shadow. I don't really understand Quidditch, said Colin breathlessly. Is it true that there are 4 balls, and 2 of them fly around trying to knock people off their brooms? Yes, said Harry heavily, resigned to explaining the complicated rules of Quidditch. They're called bludgers. There are 2 beaters on each team who carry clubs to beat the bludgers away from their side. Fred and George Weasley are the Gryffindor beaters. And what are the other balls for? Colin asked, tripping down a couple of steps because he was gazing open-mouthed at Harry. Well, the quaffle, that's the biggest red one, is the one that scores goals. 3 chasers on each team show the quaffle to each other and try to get it through the goalposts at the end of the pitch. They're 3 long poles with hoops on the end. And the 4th ball is the golden snitch, said Harry. And it's very small, very fast, and difficult to catch. But that's what the Seekers got to do, because a game of Quidditch doesn't end until the snitch has been caught. And whichever team Seeker gets the snitch earns to his team an extra 150 points. And you're the Gryffindor Seeker, aren't you? Said Colin in awe. Yes, said Harry, as they left the castle and started across the dew-drenched grass. And there's a keeper, too. He guards the goalposts. That's it, really. But Colin didn't stop questioning Harry all the way down the sloping lawns to the Quidditch field, and Harry only shook him off when he reached the changing rooms. Colin called after him in a piping voice, I'll go and get a good seat, Harry, and hurried off to the stands. The rest of the Gryffindor team were already in the changing room. Wood was the only person who looked truly awake. Fred and George Weasley were sitting, puffy-eyed and tousle-haired, next to 4th-year Alicia Spinner, who seemed to be nodding off against the wall behind her. Her fellow chasers, Katie Bell and Angelina Johnson, were yawning side by side opposite them. There you are, Harry. What kept you? Said Wood briskly. Now I wanted a quick talk with you all before we actually get onto the field, because I spent the summer devising a whole new training program, which I really think will make all the difference. Wood was holding up a large diagram of the Quidditch field, on which were drawn many lines, arrows, and crosses in different colored inks. He took out his wand, tapped the board, and the arrows began to wiggle over the diagram like caterpillars. As Wood launched into a speech about his new tactics, Fred Weasley's head dropped right into Alicia Spinner's shoulder, and he began to snore. The first board took nearly 20 minutes to explain, but there was another board under that, and a third under that one. Harry sank into a stupor as Wood droned on and on. So, said Wood, at long last, jerking Harry from a wishful fantasy about what he could be eating for breakfast at this very moment up at the castle. Is that clear? Any questions? I've got a question, Oliver, said George, who had woken with a start. Why couldn't you have told us all of this yesterday when we were awake? Wood wasn't pleased. Now listen here, you lot, he said, glowing at all of them. We should have won the Quidditch Cup last year. We're easily the best team, but unfortunately, owing to circumstances beyond our control, Harry shifted guiltily in his seat. He had been unconscious in the hospital wing for the final match of the previous year, meaning that Gryffindor had been a player short and had suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. Wood took a moment to regain control of himself. Their last defeat was clearly still torturing him. So this year, we train harder than ever before. Okay, let's go and put our theories into practice, Wood shouted, seizing his broomstick and leading the way out of the locker room. Stiff-legged and still yawning, his team followed. They had been in the locker room so long that the sun was up completely now, although remnants of mist hung over the grass in the stadium. As Harry walked onto the field, he saw Ron and Hermione sitting in the stands. Aren't you finished yet? Called Ron incredulously. Haven't even started, said Harry, looking jealously at the toast and marmalade Ron and Hermione had brought out of the great hall. Wood's been teaching us new moves. He mounted his broomstick and kicked it at the ground, soaring up into the air. The cool morning air whipped his face, waking him far more effectively than Wood's long talk. It felt wonderful to be back on the Quidditch field. He soared right around the stadium at full speed, facing Fred and George. What's that funny clicking noise? Called Fred as they hurtled around the corner. Harry looked into the stands. Colin was sitting in one of the highest seats, his camera raised, taking picture after picture, the sound strangely magnified in the deserted stadium. Look this way, Harry, this way, he cried shrilly. Who's that? Said Fred. No idea. Harry lied, putting on a spurt of speed that took him as far away as possible from Colin. What's going on? Said Wood, frowning as he skimmed through the air toward them. Why is that first year taking pictures? I don't like it. He could be a Slytherin spy, trying to find out about our new training program. He's in Gryffindor, said Harry quickly. And the Slytherin don't need a spy, Oliver, said George. What makes you say that? Said Wood testily. Because they're here in person, said George, pointing. Several people in green robes were walking onto the field, broomsticks in hand. I don't believe it, Wood hissed in outrage. I booked the field for today. We'll see about this. Wood shot toward the ground, landing rather harder than he meant to in his anger, staggering slightly as he dismounted. Harry, Fred, and George followed. Flint, Wood bellowed at the Slytherin captain. This is our practice time. We got up specially. You can clear off now. Marcus Flint was even larger than Wood. He had a look of trollish cunning on his face as he replied, Plenty of room for all of us, Wood. Angelina, Alicia, and Katie had come over too. There were no girls in the Slytherin team, who stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the Gryffindors, leering to a man. But I booked the field, said Wood, positively spitting with rage. I booked it. Ah, said Flint, but I've got a specially signed note here from Professor Snape. I, Professor S. Snape, give the Slytherin team permission to practice today on the Quidditch field, owing to the need to train their new seeker. You've got a new seeker? Said Wood, distracted. Where? And from behind the 6 large figures before them came a 7th, smaller boy, smoking all over his pale, pointed face. It was Draco Malfoy. Aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son? Said Fred, looking at Malfoy with dislike. Funny you should mention Draco's father, said Flint, as the whole Slytherin team smiled still more broadly. Let me show you the generous gift he's made to the Slytherin team. All 7 of them held out their broomsticks. 7 highly polished, brand new handles and 7 sets of fine gold lettering, spelling the words Nimbus 2001, gleamed under the Gryffindors' noses in the early morning sun. Very latest model. Only came out last month, said Flint carelessly, flicking a speck of dust from the end of his own. I believe it outstrips the old 2000 series by a considerable amount. As for the old clean sweeps, he smiled nastily at Fred and George, who were both clutching clean sweep fives. Sweeps the board with them. None of the Gryffindor team could think of anything to say for a moment. Malfoy was smoking so broadly his cold eyes were reduced to slits. Oh, look, said Flint. A field invasion. Ron and Hermione were crossing the grass to see what was going on. What's happening? Ron asked Harry. Why aren't you playing? And what's he doing here? He was looking at Malfoy, taking in Slytherin Quidditch robes. I'm the new Slytherin seeker, Weasley, said Malfoy smugly. Everyone's just been admiring the brooms my father's bought our team. Ron gaped, open-mouthed, at the 7 superb broomsticks in front of him. Good, aren't they? Said Malfoy smoothly. But perhaps the Gryffindor team will be able to raise some gold and get new brooms too. You could raffle off those clean sweep fives. I expect a museum would bid for them. Sorry about that little break there. The Slytherin team howled with laughter. At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, said Hermione sharply. They got in on pure talent. The smug look on Malfoy's face flickered. No one asked your opinion, you filthy mudblood, he spat. Harry knew at once that Malfoy had said something really bad because there was an instant uproar in his words. Flint had to dive in front of Malfoy to stop Fred and George jumping on him. Alicia shrieked, How dare you? And Ron plunged his hands into his robe, pulled out his wand, yelling, You'll pay for that one, Malfoy, and pointed it furiously under Flint's arm at Malfoy's face. A loud bang echoed around the stadium, and a jet of green light shot out of the wrong end of Ron's wand, hitting him in the stomach and sending him reeling backward onto the grass. Ron! Ron! Are you all right? Squealed Hermione. Ron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he gave an almighty belch, and several slugs dripped out of his mouth onto his lap. The Slytherin team were paralyzed with laughter. Flint was doubled up, hanging onto his new broomstick for support. Malfoy was on all fours, banging the ground with his feet. The Gryffindors were gathered around Ron, who kept belching large, glistening slugs. Nobody seemed to want to touch him. We'd better get him back to Hagrid's. It's nearest, said Harry to Hermione, who nodded bravely at the pair of them, and the pair of them pulled Ron up by the arms. What happened, Harry? What happened? Is he ill? But you can cure him, can't you? Colin had run down from the seats and was now dancing alongside them as they left the field. Ron gave a huge heave and more slugs dripped down his front. Ugh, said Colin, fascinated and raising his camera. Can you hold him still, Harry? Get out of the way, Colin, said Harry angrily. He and Hermione supported Ron out of the stadium and across the grounds toward the edge of the forest. Nearly there, Ron, said Hermione as the gamekeeper's cabin came into view. You'll be all right in a minute. We're almost there. They were within 20 feet of Hagrid's house when the front door opened, but it wasn't Hagrid who emerged. Gilderoy Lockhart, wearing robes of palest mauve today, came striding out. Quick, behind here, Harry hissed, dragging Ron behind a nearby bush. Hermione followed, somewhat reluctantly. It's a simple matter if you know what you're doing, Lockhart was saying loudly to Hagrid. If you need help, you know where I am. I'll let you have a copy of my book. I'm surprised you haven't already got one. I'll sign one tonight and send it over. Well, goodbye. And he strode away toward the castle. Harry waited until Lockhart was out of sight, then pulled Ron out of the bush and up to Hagrid's front door. They knocked us. They knocked urgently. Hagrid appeared at once, looking very grumpy, but his impressions brightened when he saw who it was. Been wondering when you'd come to see me. Come in, come in. Thought you might have been Professor Lockhart back again. Harry and Hermione supported Ron over the threshold into the one-roomed cabin, which had an enormous bed in one corner, a fire crackling merrily in the other. Hagrid didn't seem perturbed by Ron's slug problem, which Harry hastily explained as he lowered Ron into a chair. Better out than in, he said cheerfully, plunking a large copper basin in front of him. Get 'em all up, Ron. I don't think there's anything to do except wait for it to stop, said Hermione anxiously, watching Ron bend over the basin. That's a difficult curse to work at the best of times. But with a broken wand, Hagrid was bustling around making them tea. His boarhound, Fang, was slobbering over Harry. What did Lockhart want with you, Hagrid? Harry asked, scratching Fang's ears. Giving me advice on getting kelpies out of a well, growled Hagrid, moving a plucked rooster off his scrubbed table and setting down the teapot. Like I don't know. And banging on about some banshee he banished. If one word of it is true, I'll eat my kettle. It was most unlike Hagrid to criticize a Hogwarts teacher, and Harry looked at him in surprise. Hermione, however, said in a voice somewhat higher than usual, I think you're being a bit unfair. Professor Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job. He was the only man for the job, said Hagrid, offering them a plate of treacle fudge, while Ron coughed squealily into his basin. And I meant the only one. Getting very difficult to find anyone for the dark arts job. People aren't too keen to take it on. See, they're starting to think it's jinxed. No one's lasted long enough. No one's lasted long for a while now. So tell me, said Hagrid, jerking his head at Ron. Who was he trying to curse? Malfoy called Hermione something. It must have been really bad because everyone went wild. It was bad, said Ron hoarsely, emerging over the tabletop looking pale and sweaty. Malfoy called her Mudblood, Hagrid. Ron dived out of sight again as a fresh wave of slugs made their appearance. Hagrid looked outraged. He didn't, he growled at Hermione. He did, she said, but I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. It's about the most insulting thing he could have, gasped Ron, coming back up. Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who is muggle-born. You know, non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like the Malfoy family, who think they're better than everyone else because they're what people call pure blood. He gave a small burp, and a single slug fell into his outstretched hand. He threw it into the basin and continued. I mean, the rest of us know it doesn't make any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood, and he can hardly stand a cauldron the right way up. And they haven't invented a spell our Hermione can't do, said Hagrid proudly, making Hermione go brilliant shade of magenta. It's a disgusting thing to call someone, said Ron, wiping his sweaty brow with a shaking hand. Dirty blood, see? Come on. Common blood. It's ridiculous. Most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married muggles, we've died out. We'd have died out. He reached out and ducked out of sight again. Well, I don't blame you for trying to curse him, Ron, said Hagrid loudly over the thuds of more slugs hitting the basin. But maybe it was a good thing your wand backfired. Suspect Lucius Malfoy would have come marching up to school if if you cursed his son. At least you're not in trouble. Harry would have pointed out the trouble didn't come much worse than having slugs pouring out of your mouth, but he couldn't. Hagrid's treacle fudge had cemented his jaws together. Sorry, everyone got distracted. Uh, Harry, said Hagrid abruptly, as though struck by a sudden thought. Got a bone to pick with you. I've heard you've been giving out signed photos. How come I haven't got one? Furious, Harry wrenched his teeth apart. I have not been giving out signed photos, he said hotly. If Lockhart's still spreading that around. But then he saw that Hagrid was laughing. I'm only joking, he said, patting Harry genially on the back and sending him face first into the table. I knew you hadn't really. I told Lockhart you didn't need to. For you're more famous than him without trying. Bet he didn't like that, said Harry, sitting up and rubbing his chin. Don't think he did, said Hagrid, his eyes twinkling. And and then I told him I'd read one of his books, and he decided to go. Treacle fudge, Ron? He added as Ron reappeared. No thanks, said Ron weakly. Better, better not risk it. Come and see what I've been growing, said Hagrid as Harry and Hermione finished the last of their tea. In the small vegetable patch behind Hagrid's house were a dozen of the largest pumpkins Harry had ever seen. Each was the size of a large boulder. Getting on well, aren't they? Said Hagrid happily. For the Halloween feast. Should be big enough by then. What have you been feeding them? Said Harry. Hagrid looked over his shoulder to check that they were alone. Well, I've been giving them, you know, a bit of help. Harry noticed Hagrid's flowery pink umbrella leaning against the back wall of the cabin. Harry had reason to believe before now that this umbrella was not all it looked. In fact, he had the strong impression that Hagrid's old school wand was concealed inside it. Hagrid wasn't supposed to use magic. He had been expelled from Hogwarts in his third year, but Harry had never found out why. Any mention of the matter, and Hagrid would clear his throat loudly and become mysteriously deaf until the subject was changed. An engorgement charm, I suppose, said Hermione, halfway between disapproval and amusement. Well, you've done a good job on them. That's what your little sister said Hagrid, nodding at Ron. I reckon she was hoping she might run into someone else at my house. He winked at Harry. If you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a signed. Oh, shut up, said Harry. Ron. Um, Ron snorted with laughter, and the ground was sprayed with slugs. Watch it, Hagrid roared, pulling Ron away from his precious pumpkins. It was nearly lunchtime, and as Harry had only had one bit of treacle fudge since dawn, he was keen to go back to school to eat. They said goodbye to Hagrid and walked back up to the castle, Ron hiccuping occasionally, but only bringing up two very small slugs. They had barely set foot in the cool entrance hall when a voice rang out. There you are, Potter. Weasley. Professor McGonagall was walking toward them, looking stern. You will both do your detention this evening. What are we doing, Professor? Said Ron nervously, suppressing a burp. You will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch, said Professor McGonagall. And no magic, Weasley. Elbow grease. Ron gulped. Argus Filch, the caretaker, was loathed by every student in the school. And you, Potter, will be helping Professor Lockhart answer his fan mail, said Professor McGonagall. Oh, Professor, can't I go and do the trophy room too? Said Harry desperately. Certainly not, said Professor McGonagall, raising her eyebrows. Professor Lockhart requested you particularly. 8 o'clock sharp, both of you. Harry and Ron slouched into the great hall in states of deepest gloom, Hermione behind them, wearing a, well, you did break school rules sort of expression. Harry didn't enjoy his shepherd's pie as much as he thought. Both he and Ron felt they'd got the worst of the deal. Filch'll had me there all night, said Ron heavily. No magic. There must be 100 cups in that room. I'm no good at muggle cleaning. I'd swap any time, said Harry hollowly. I've had loads of practice with the Dursleys, answering Lockhart's fan mail. He'll be a nightmare. Saturday afternoon seemed to melt away, and in what seemed like no time, it was 5 minutes to 8, and Harry was dragging his feet along the second floor corridor to Lockhart's office. He gritted his teeth and knocked. The door flew open at once. Lockhart beamed down at him. Ah, here's the scalawag, he said. Come in, Harry, come in. Shining brightly on the walls by the light of many candles were countless framed photographs of Lockhart. He had even signed a few of them. Another large pile lay on his desk. You can address the envelopes, Lockhart told Harry, as though this was a huge treat. This first one's to Gladys Gudgeon. Bless her. Huge fan of mine. The minutes snailed by. Harry let Lockhart's voice wash over him, occasionally saying, and right, and yeah. Now and then he caught a phrase like, fame's a fickle friend, Harry, or celebrity is as celebrity does. Remember that. The candles burned lower and lower, making the light dance over the many moving faces of Lockhart's watching him. Many faces of Lockhart watching him. Harry moved his aching hand over what felt like the 1,000 envelopes, writing out Veronica Smethly's address. It must be nearly time to leave. Harry thought miserably. Please let it be nearly time. And then he heard something quite apart from the splitting of the dying candles and Lockhart's prattle about his fans. It was a voice to chill the bone marrow, a voice of breathtaking, ice cold venom. Come, come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you. Harry gave a huge jump, and a large lilac blot appeared on Veronica's Smethly Street. What? He said loudly. I know, said Lockhart. 6 solid months at the top of the bestseller list broke all records. No, said Harry frantically. That voice. Sorry, said Lockhart, looking puzzled. What voice? That. That voice. That said, didn't you hear it? Lockhart was looking at Harry in high astonishment. What are you talking about, Harry? Perhaps you're getting a little drowsy? Great Scott, look at the time. We've been here nearly 4 hours. I'd never have believed it. The time's just flown, hasn't it? Harry didn't answer. He was straining his ears to hear the voice again, but there was no sound now except for Lockhart telling him he must have expected a treat like this every time he got detention. Feeling dazed, Harry left. It was so late that the Gryffindor common room was almost empty. Harry went straight up to the dormitory. Ron wasn't back yet. Harry pulled on his pajamas, got into bed, and waited. Half an hour later, Ron arrived, nursing his right arm and bringing a strong smell of polish into the darkened room. My muscles have all seized up, he groaned, sinking on his bed. 14 times he made me buff up the Quidditch cup before he was satisfied. And then I had another slug attack all over a special award for services to the school. Took ages to get the slime off. How is it with Lockhart? Keeping his voice low so as not to wake Neville, Dean, and Seamus, Harry told Ron exactly what he had heard. And Lockhart said he couldn't hear it? Said Ron. Harry could see him frowning in the moonlight. Do you think he was lying? But I don't get it. Even someone invisible wouldn't had to open the door. I know, said Harry, lying back in his four-poster and staring at the canopy above him. I don't get it either. And that's the end of chapter 7. We're going to take a short break so I can get a little drink of water, and we'll pick it right back up. All right. All right. Thanks for letting me get a quick hydrate break. Appreciate that, everyone. Oop, almost lost our page there. All right. We are on chapter 8, the Death Day Party. I'm not sure if we'll finish this chapter before this Zoom session's over, so we'll get as far as we can. All right, here we go. Chapter 8, the Death Day Party. October arrived, spreading a damp chill over the grounds and into the castle. Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, was kept busy by a sudden spate of colds among the staff and students. Her pepper-up potion worked instantly, though it left the drinkers smoking at the ears for several hours afterwards. Ginny Weasley, who had been looking pale, was bullied into taking some by Percy. The steam pouring from under her vivid hair gave the impression that her whole head was on fire. Raindrops the size of bullets thundered on the castle windows for days on end. The lake rose, the flower beds turned into muddy streams, and Hagrid's pumpkins swelled to the size of garden sheds. Oliver Wood's enthusiasm for regular training sessions, however, was not dampened, which was why Harry was to be found late one stormy Saturday afternoon, a few days before Halloween, returning to Gryffindor Tower drenched to the skin and splattered with mud. Even aside from the rain and the wind, it hadn't been a happy practice session. Fred and George, who had been spying on the Slytherin team, had seen for themselves the speed of those Nimbus 2001s. They reported that the Slytherin team was no more than 7 greenish blurs, shooting through the air like missiles. Harry squelched along and the deserted corridor. As Harry squelched along the deserted corridor, he came across somebody who looked just as preoccupied as he was. Nearly headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor Tower, was staring more slowly out of a window, muttering under his breath, "Don't fulfill their requirements. Half an inch, if that." "Hello, Nick," said Harry. "Hello, hello," said nearly headless Nick, starting to look around. He wore a dashing, plumped hat on his long, curly hair, and a tunic with a ruff, which concealed the fact that his neck was almost completely severed. He was pale as smoke, and Harry could see right through him to the dark sky and torrential rain outside. "You look troubled, young Potter," said Nick, folding a transparent letter as he spoke and tucking it under his doublet. "So do you," said Harry. "Ah," nearly headless Nick waved an elegant hand. "A matter of no importance. It's not as though I really wanted to join, though I'd apply, but apparently I don't fulfill requirements." In spite of his airy tone, there was a look of great bitterness on his face. "But you would think, wouldn't you," he erupted suddenly, pulling the letter back out of his pocket, "that getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe would qualify you to join the Headless Hunt." "Oh, yes," said Harry, who was obviously supposed to agree. "I mean, nobody wishes more than I do that it had all been quick and clean. And my head had come off properly, I mean. It would have saved me a great deal of pain and ridicule, however." Nearly Headless Nick shook his letter open and read furiously. We can only accept huntsmen whose heads have parted who have parted company with their bodies. You will appreciate that it would be impossible otherwise for members to participate in hunt activities such as horseback head juggling and head polo. It is with greatest regret, therefore, that I must inform you that you do not fulfill our requirements. With very best wishes, Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore. Fuming, Nearly Headless Nick stuffed the letter away. Half an inch of skin and sinew holding my neck on, Harry. Most people would think that's good and be headed, but oh no, it's not enough for Sir Properly Decapitated Podmore. Nearly Headless Nick took several deep breaths and then said in a far clamoured tone, "So, what's bothering you? Anything I can do?" "No, no," said Harry. "Not unless you know where we can get 7 free Nimbus 2001s for our match against The rest of Harry's sentence was drowned out by a high-pitched mewling from somewhere near his ankles. He looked down and found himself gazing into a pair of lamp-like yellow eyes. It was Mrs. Norris. The It was Mrs. Norris, the skeletal gray cat who was used by the caretaker, Argus Filch, as a sort of deputy in his endless battle against students. "You'd better get out of here, Harry," said Nick quickly. "Filch isn't in a good mood. He's got the flu, and some third years accidentally plastered frog brains all over the ceiling in Dungeon 5. He's been cleaning all morning. And if he sees you dripping mud all over the place..." "Right," said Harry, backing away from the accusing stare of Mrs. Norris, but not quickly enough. Drawn to the spot by the mysterious power that seemed to connect him with his foul cat, Argus Filch burst suddenly through a tapestry to Harry's right, wheezing and looking wildly about for the rule breaker. There was a thick tartan scarf bound around his head, and his nose was unusually purple. "Filth!" he shouted, his jowls quiver, his eyes popping alarmingly as he pointed to the muddy puddle that had dripped from Harry's Quidditch robes. "Mess and muck everywhere. I've had enough of it, I tell you. Follow me, Potter." So Harry waved a gloomy goodbye to Nearly Headless Nick and followed Filch back downstairs, doubling the number of muddy footprints on the floor. Harry had never been inside Filch's office before. It was a place most students avoided. The room was dingy and windowless, lit by a single oil lamp dangling from a low ceiling. A faint smell of fried fish lingered about the place. Wooden filing cabinets stood round the wall. From their labels, Harry could see that they contained details of every pupil Filch had ever punished. Fred and George Weasley had an entire drawer to themselves. A highly polished collection of chains and manacles hung on the wall behind Filch's desk. It was common knowledge that he was always begging Dumbledore to let him suspend students by their ankles from the ceiling. Filch grabbed a quill from a pot on his desk and began shuffling around looking for parchment. "Dung," he muttered furiously. "Great sizzling dragon boggies. Frog brains, rat intestines. I've had enough of it. Make an example. Where's the form? Yes." He retrieved a large roll of parchment from his desk drawer and stretched it out in front of him, dripping his long black quill into an ink pot. "Name? Harry Potter. Crime? It was only a bit of mud," said Harry. "It's only a bit of mud to you, boy, but to me it's an extra hour's scrubbing," shouted Filch, a drip shivering unpleasantly at the end of his bulbous nose. "Crime? Befouling the castle. Suggested sentence?" Dabbing at his streaming nose, Filch squinted unpleasantly at Harry, who waited with bated breath for his sentence to fall. But as Filch lowered his quill, there was a great big bang on the ceiling of his office, which made the oil lamp rattle. "Peeves!" Filch roared, flinging down his quill in a transport of rage. "I'll have you this time! I'll have you!" And without a backward glance at Harry, Filch ran flat-footed from the office, Mrs. Norris streaking alongside him. Peeves was the school poltergeist, a grinning airborne menace who lived to cause havoc and distress. Harry didn't much like Peeves, but couldn't help feeling grateful for his timing. Hopefully, whatever Peeves had done, it sounded as though he'd wrecked something very big this time, would distract Filch from Harry. Thinking that he should probably wait for Filch to come back, Harry sank into a moth-eaten chair next to the desk. There was only one thing on it, apart from his half-completed form, a large, glossy purple envelope with silver lettering on front. With a quick glance at the door to check if wasn't on his way back, Harry picked up the envelope and read, "Quirk Spell, a correspondence course in beginner's magic." Intrigued, Harry flicked the envelope open and pulled out the sheaf of parchment inside. More curly silver writing on the front page said, "Feel out of step in the world of modern magic? Find yourself making excuses not to perform simple spells? Ever been taunted by your woeful wand work? There is an answer. Kirkspell is an all-new, fail-safe, quick-result, easy-learn course. Hundreds of witches and wizards have benefited from the Kirkspell method. Madame Z. Nettles of Topspin writes, I had no memory for incantations, and my potions were a family joke. Now, after a Kirkspell curse, I am the center of attention at parties, and friends beg for the recipe of my Sicilian solution, scintillation solution. Warlock D. J. Prod of Didsbury says, my wife used to sneer at my feeble charms, but 1 month into your fabulous Kirkspell course, and I succeeded in turning her into a yak. Thank you, Kirkspell." Fascinated, Harry thumbed through the rest of the envelope's contents. Why on earth did Filch want a Kirkspell course? Did this mean he wasn't a proper wizard? Harry was just reading Lesson 1, Holding Your Wand, Some Useful Tips, when shuffling footsteps outside told him Filch was coming back. Stuffing the parchment back into the envelope, Harry threw it back onto the desk just as the door opened. Filch was looking triumphant. "That vanishing cabinet was extremely valuable," he was saying gleefully to Mrs. Norris. "We'll have Peeves out this time, my sweet." His eyes fell on Harry, and then darted to the Kirkspell envelope, which Harry realized too late was lying 2 feet away from where it had started. Filch's pasty face went brick red. Harry braced himself for a tidal wave of fury. Filch hobbled across to his desk, snatched up the envelope, and threw it into a drawer. "Have you... Did you read..." he sputtered. "No," Harry lied quickly. Filch's knobbly hands were twisting together. "If I thought you read my private... Not that it's mine. For a friend. Be that as it may, however." Harry was staring at him, alarmed. Filch had never looked madder. His eyes were popping, a tick was going in one of his pouchy cheeks, and the tartan scarf didn't help. "Very well, go, and don't breathe a word. Not that, however, if you didn't read. Go on. I have to write up Peeves' report. Just go." Amazed at his luck, Harry sped out of the office, up the corridor, and back upstairs. To escape from Filch's office without punishment was probably some kind of school record. "Harry! Harry! Did it work?" Nearly Headless Nick came gliding out of the classroom. Behind him, Harry could see the wreckage of a large black and gold cabinet that appeared to have been dropped from a great height. "I persuaded Peeves to crash it right over Filch's office," said Nick eagerly. Thought it might distract him. Was that you? Said Harry gratefully. Yeah, it worked. I didn't even get detention. Thanks, Nick. They set up up they set off up the corridor together. Nearly headless Nick, Harry noticed, was still holding Sir Patrick's rejection letter. I wish there was something I could do for you about the headless hunt, Harry said. Nearly headless Nick stopped in his tracks, and Harry walked right through him. He wished he hadn't. It was like stepping through an icy shower. But there is something you could do for me, said Nick excitedly. Harry, would I be asking too much? But no, you wouldn't want. What is it? Said Harry. Well, this Halloween will be my 500th death day, said Nearly Headless Nick, drawing himself up and looking dignified. Oh, said Harry, not sure whether he should look sorry or happy about this. Right. I'm holding a party down in one of the roomier dungeons. Friends will be coming all over the country. It would be such an honor if you would attend. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger would be most welcome too, of course. But I dare say you'd rather go to school to the school feast. He watched Harry on tenterhooks. No, said Harry quickly. I'll come. My dear boy, Harry Potter at my death day party. And he hesitated, looking excited. Do you think you could possibly mention to Sir Patrick how very frightening and impressive you find me? "Oh, of course," said Harry. Nearly Headless Nick beamed at him. Okay, that looks like a pause in the chapter right there. And we got a couple minutes before class ends. So we're going to stop right there. If you're following along, we're on page 130, chapter 8, titled The Death Day Party. Hey, thanks for joining me, everyone, for today. If you're here with us live, doesn't look like there's any questions to answer in the chat box. But if you're listening to this after hours, then go ahead and email me or send me a direct message, your question or comments, or if you have something about our class, or maybe it's about another class. Sorry about that. Or maybe it's about Edgenuity in general, or grades, or summer school, or Canvas, or life, or what to barbecue for Memorial Day holiday. Maybe you have questions about community service, whatever it may be. Feel free. Don't hesitate. Just reach out, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for everyone who's completing the quick write questions on Google Classroom for a health class. And if you're in PE class, thanks for filling out your workout logs. Remember, you have 2 weeks left to complete your workout logs. For every 9 hours completed, I will raise your grade 1 letter grade for your semester, final semester grade. With this long weekend coming, I just ask that you please, everyone, be safe, wash your hands, and make sure you check on a friend or a family member. All right, everyone, have a great rest of the day. Happy weekend. And until next time, be safe out there. All right, bye, everyone.